Nelfund, we'll explore how the fund plans to stay liquid during economic volatility, prevent defaults, and keep student loans aligned with real costs in an inflationary environment. Joining me for this conversation, we have Mr. Akintunde Sawyerr as the MD CEO, Nigerian Education Loan Fund. That's Nelfund. Great to have you on the show, sir, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Mr. Williams. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. It's great to have you. So definitely, I can see 2025 was quite interesting. Nelfund disbursed about 161.97 billion in student loans since launch in May 2024 to December 29, 2025. 89.94 billion paid directly to institutions. 72 billion naira as upkeep, living allowances to students. So it looks like we were quite busy in 2025. Help us paint the picture on the impact to students and their learning.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for presenting very accurate, up-to-date figures. So in terms of the impact on students, I can tell you that one of the greatest impacts we've seen is the fact that people now believe that the scheme is real. When we started this program right back in 2024, at the end of May, there was a lot of skepticism. Is this real? Will it happen? Will students get paid? So the greatest impact we've had is to be able to convince people that the scheme is real. And that is really important because this is a scheme that's designed to rescue those who want to further their education into the tertiary space, actually believing and making the step of applying for the loan. To date, we've had 1.3 million applications for this loan. I think that's a very significant number given where we're coming from, and we've had 864,000 people who have directly benefited from the loan. So there is impact. People are feeling it. It's not perfect, but people are feeling it. We're refining and retuning the scheme as we go along. We're taking feedback, and we continue to make noise about it so that people know that they need to come and apply if they need it. I think the long-term impact we will see over the next decade, over the next 2 decades, how important it is to have an educated populace. The president is really more interested in the long-term impact of this on the nation and on the people of Nigeria and in our global positioning in the global economy.
Right. And, talking about 89.94 billion naira paid directly to institutions as fees, you did say it's not perfect, yeah, because we still keep getting those complaints about, some students, not getting the funds, not getting to the institutions on time. Because normally, when it's school fees time, there's a deadline. And most of the time, we've seen some students actually complain that the money is not getting to the institutions, on time. What's the way around that?
Thank you. Again, let's look at where we're coming from. We're coming from an environment where we've been plagued and dogged by strikes in tertiary institutions that have put many schools out of sync in terms of their sessions. We've got schools today who are running double sessions depending on the department. We've got schools today who are starting sessions when others are just ending the sessions. You now introduce the additional complexity on top of that of saying to students, come and apply for these loans. Students don't all go and apply on the same day. We don't run a regimented loan application day for students. What we do is we say, come and apply for the loan. Now, when people apply for the loans, clearly from an efficiency perspective, we're not going to process one student loan today and pay it today. We wait for a reasonable number of those loan applications to come in. We batch them, and then we push them out to the various institutions that the students have told us that they have come from because it's an online application. And then we wait for the institution to tell us that the students are indeed bona fide present students in their institutions. Until that happens, we don't make any payments, I'm afraid. We wait for that to come back. Now, I can tell you that some institutions are very quick at responding, others are a little bit slower. But regardless of that, because students are applying at different times and we naturally have to run a batching process, we're not running an instant loan scheme. we're running a scheme for a large number of students going to institutions, and there are dependencies for the institutions to tell us when they're actually going to be able to verify. The other thing I should tell you is that we've been plagued a little bit by some institutions putting their fees up. Now, I'm not going to go down the line of saying this is entirely malicious. Education is not inexpensive. Some of these institutions have been running at fees that just about allow their students to pay. Now that there's a new pair on the block in Nelfund, they've seen the opportunity to push up their fees, not necessarily to exorbitantly, but to be able to cover their own costs. That has thrown our system into a little bit of chaos because we are trying to manage funds and trying to ensure that this democratized process reaches as many students as possible. As a very simple example as well, we've got the issue of some courses that are several million for the students to be able to complete the course per session. And then there are some that are in the sort of low thousands. Sometimes we have to look at these and do a sort of proper budgeting process. I can tell you that on Monday we have a meeting with institutions with high fees and some with very expensive courses to see how we can work together and harmonize this. We don't want to make part payments. We don't want to make part payment for a course and then the student is going out hustling or looking for the rest of it. So these things have to be sorted out. We have to map them out. We have to partner with the institutions, and we have to ensure that at some point, because you can see that there are fewer strikes now, that we're working in an environment where all the institutions have some sort of matching timetable in terms of when they start the session, when they end the session, so that we can put proper start dates for application and proper closing of applications, because we can predict when the institutions are going to start their sessions or their tuition.
All right. So, looking at what's been paid out so far, we've seen 864,000 plus students. That's a number of beneficiaries so far. And this kind of fund definitely needs a lot of, ammo. So let's look at, sustaining the loan fund. Now, beyond the, 1%, of federal tax, what are the interesting revenue generating activities is Nelfund, considering? Because definitely, I'm sure you're still going to have to disburse a lot of money, this year.
Thank you for that really great question, Mr. Williams. So I can tell you, let me just make a quick correction. When we started this, we were on 1% of taxes collected by FIRS for the Federation account. We've moved now, because of the new reforms, the tax reforms, we've moved now to being able to access 15% of the development levy. Okay, so your question relates, I believe, to sustainability and how we can get our funds back. There are a number of different areas. One is obviously repayment by students. Students will make repayments. That clearly isn't going to be sufficient for a number of reasons. One, our loans are interest-free. The second is that they don't have to start paying back until 2 years after NYSC, and only if they have a job. Clearly, that alone is not going to sustain the Nelfund. So the president, in his wisdom, has introduced into the reenactment, which he signed on the 4th of April, 2025, he introduced the opportunity for Nelfund, one, to invest the funds that we have for income. We obviously receive large amounts of funds, and we can now invest those funds, albeit in government instruments, treasury bills and the likes, to get some sort of income back. The second thing that the president did that was really good, President Tinubu gave the opportunity in the reenactment for Nelfund to go out and source for funds from NGOs, from high net worth individuals, from corporate organizations, from those who want to invest in education in one way or the other, from philanthropists. So we do have the laxity, the latitude, should I say, I beg your pardon, the latitude to go out and source funds from other areas beyond the funds that the government is providing. We're going to be very active in pursuing those lines in the year that we're in, and we're already talking to some foundations with aligned interests to see how we can collaborate and cooperate to ensure that this fund can be sustained, and sustained in the for the longest possible term.
And yeah, definitely, these are loans. They're not grants. They need to be paid back. So what mechanisms are being built into the portal to maintain some kind of emotional proximity with the beneficiaries after graduation, so that repayment is not viewed as a civic. It's viewed as a civic duty rather than a burden.
Sure. So look, I think we need to give credit to Nigerians. And it's important for me to establish for you at this stage that Nelfund is not, I repeat, is not a commercial organization. We're not here to make a profit. We're here to profit the Nigerian nation by building an educated base of people who can make this nation stronger, who can make this nation more competitive, who can make this nation less prone to crime, less prone to frustrated individuals causing mayhem, as we've seen in various parts of the country in recent times, and that allow us, as I mentioned earlier, to be globally competitive so that investment comes to the country. Our primary focus is to ensure that our country can win business at home and can win business abroad. We cannot do that unless our populace is educated. Now, clearly, we have a very large population. So in one sense, we're playing catch up already, trying to ensure that we can educate, in many cases, people who have already gone past an age where we can, can intervene effectively. So back to the crux of your question, which is what are the mechanisms for repayment? I can tell you that, like any financial institution, we're going to have to monitor those who we give these loans to properly, but the law doesn't encourage or isn't there for us to go after individuals who take the loan. These people are taking the loan to educate themselves, not to buy luxury items, apartments in luxury areas. They're taking these loans so that they can get good jobs. Now, I'll tell you, what we've done or what the law says is that it is the employer. And the mechanism that you described, everybody who applies for this loan has to have an NIN, National Identification Number. It is that NIN that allows us to track the individuals to see exactly what it is that they're doing. Employers will be obliged to go to a database, to a data register to see who they're employing who has the loan. And then it's the employer that has the obligation to pay 10% back of that person's salary or wages to the loan fund, except in two cases. One, in the case where the individual is self-employed, and secondly, in the case where the individual goes abroad. Now, clearly, if the individual goes abroad and works for another organization outside the jurisdiction of Nigeria, then it's difficult for us to oblige that employer to pay us back that 10%. However, we are going to be making moves to see where the majority of people go so that we can engage the potential employers who are benefiting from the education that Nigeria is investing in Nigerians who may be going to work abroad. But I must emphasize at this stage, this is not a slave contract. This is not a loan that if you take it, we're going to say you can't travel. So let me stop there for now, but I'm quite happy to clarify that further for you if you like.
Fantastic. But, it's great, even though you find yourself, working abroad, you still remember that you need to, sort out your fund here. That's from the, your payment from Nelfund. But, we need to factor in inflation. When it comes to loans, inflation can be some kind of, it could just spoil it, at this point. How is the fund accounting for, fluctuation in, you did mention some tuition, some institutions, increasing fees, maybe because they feel like, oh, Nelfund is going to handle it, so they just, raise that. But how are you also factoring inflation, currency devaluation? We know 2025 was great. We saw inflation tending downwards. The Naira stayed stable, most of 2025. But we know these things can change. How are you hedging, for inflation and currency changes?
So we don't really have any direct currency exposure because we only give loans to individuals who are going to government-owned institutions in Nigeria. So if we just put the currency exposure aside, because we don't have a direct exposure to that. I say we don't have a direct exposure to that because I recognize that some of the institutions have to import materials, they have to import equipment. So that may affect their fee structure. However, it's important to recognize, as you said, that inflation is a threat. It's a threat to every business. It's a threat to every nation on the planet. The cost of living goes up everywhere. Our approach to this is that if we are able to grow the base of people who are getting educated and are employable at the same time, we're likely to be able to get ahead of the game because we become a more productive nation, because we're taking advantage of this huge population we have, educating them to be more productive. And that in itself has an impact on inflation, because if we have more productive people, there'll be more local production, there'll be less need to rely on imported labor, imported materials, and some of these other things that, that actually bring about inflation. Now, clearly, I said earlier, if you want to be globally competitive, you must provide good education. We recognize that education is not inexpensive, and we expect institutions to charge reasonable amounts of funds for the students to be able to get the education. Now, look, it's a chicken and egg situation. We have this large populace, 230 plus million people in this country, 70% under the age of 35, many of whom are doing nothing. Probably many of whom are in bed at home now because they just don't have jobs to go to. Some of the reason for that, as I quickly mentioned earlier, was that we're not attracting enough investment into Nigeria because even though we have a large population, we don't have a large educated population. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, recognized this and has given us the dual mandate as well to support TVET, Technical and Vocational Education and Training. And the Ministry of Education, who we're partnering with, is driving ahead to do that and to put that in place. We have two sets of people in every country, the thinkers and the doers, the philosophers and the people who actually do the work. And we are going to be focusing on both. Look, our strategy is to lift up this country from the bottom up, allow people to be able to earn and to be able to contribute maximally. Our focus is not how we're going to tackle inflation or how we're going to force down the cost of education. We're not interested in forcing down the cost of education. We're interested in driving up the standard of education so that people can be well educated and can be more employable. There are many, many jobs in this country that are going to foreigners because our people are not qualified, or we're giving room for organizations in this country to say, hey, look, your people can't do it, so we're going to bring somebody else in. We need to close that gap.
Right, and most of the time we've been described as a hustle economy where everyone's, being an entrepreneur, of some sort. You need to find something to do at this point. But how can, Nelfund collaborate with, National Board for Technical Education to rebrand vocational training? So it is viewed by, applicants as a first choice career path rather than, a backup, to a degree.
That's an extremely important question, Mr. Williams. The truth about it is that that's exactly what is needed. We need to rebrand and reposition vocational training and skills and put it in a place where people, one, feel they can earn enough for them to take care of their needs, and secondly, for them to feel proud to be plumbers, to be electricians, to be scaffolders. We need to bring pride back to that space. And I believe that as time goes on, if we tweak our policies and tweak our messaging and begin to pay people more. A very simple example I'll give you today is that there are lots of companies that get contracts from government agencies. Okay, those companies have all the right documentation, they put in the papers, and then they go and pick up people on the streets who have, very little qualification to be able to do the work. They make millions. The poor individual who's, sweeping and cleaning the toilet makes next to nothing. We need at some point to begin to ask questions of the companies that how well qualified are the people that you're bringing into the building? How much are you paying them? So that we can actually begin to encourage organizations that government itself is giving work to employ people who have vocational skills and vocational training. This is more of a sort of legislative issue that sits outside Nelfund, but it all plugs in and it all fits in together. We must begin to encourage professionalization in all schools, even in those who are dispensing petroleum at petrol stations. We can't keep saying, you know, you come, take, just do this. We have to begin to certify. We have to put in career paths for people so that whatever job they're doing, they have a next level and a next level and a next level. That works very well on the corporate side. It completely goes to pot on the side where vocational skills and training is required. We need to set up career structures, you know, from trainee to somebody who's operating, and then to somebody who's perhaps a supervisor or a manager, to somebody who's a director. On the vocational side, we need to introduce that structure, those titles, to give pride to people to want to do these things. The country needs it. We desperately need people to implement what the thinkers are thinking, so that we can get the doing done, so that we can actually have a country that we can be proud of when we look around us.
All right, let's look at curriculum alignment now. Is there a plan to, you know, incentivize loans for, you know, future-proof vocational skills like, you know, EV maintenance or, you know, data center management, you know, over traditional trades, you know, that may be reaching, you know, market saturation?
Yeah, so look, I mean, if you roll the clock back 45 years, 50 years, there were no cars in Nigeria with air conditioning units. There were no automatic cars in Nigeria. We had manual cars, and we had to wind down the windows in the cars to be able to get, you know, air into the car. So I'll tell you, over the period of time, over the last 50 years or so, we've had new trades, you know, air conditioning, maintenance, people. We've got people now who can fix cars that have automatic transmission, not manual. And what you're speaking to is exactly what we need to do. There are some new technologies coming in. EV, you know, EV cars are coming in. Solar is being used in various homes. You know, the government has put some initiatives in around CNG. You know, there are these new areas that are going to literally explode over the next 15, 20 years or so. And the companies who want to sell into our market should come and train and invest in training the people. You'll find, for example, that the cars that sell the most in Nigeria are the ones that are most serviceable. So there are plans to do this, but it's not entirely to be done by government. What we need to do is put policies in place that encourage those who are going to come and invest in this training to come and work with MBTs, come and work with us, come and work with the Ministry of Education, so that we can actually say, you know what, if you want to sell EV into Nigeria, how much are you investing into EV training? Very few people understand EV today. 50 years ago, very few people understood how to fix a compressor on an air conditioning unit because we just didn't have enough of them. Very few people bought automatic cars 45, 50 years ago because no one knew how to fix them. So we need to look at what the emerging technologies are, what the emerging products are, how the technologies in those products will be serviced going into the future. It will encourage those who are producing those pieces of kit to come and sell them, but under the condition that they participate in training those who can fix, maintain, and progress those things. We'll eventually get to a point where we'll begin to make and manufacture ourselves. But for now, we've just got to make sure that we stay ahead of that game. And that's part of what we're going to be focusing on when we start our skills program at Nelfund. But as I said, we're working with the Ministry of Education, and I know the Honourable Minister is very focused on the things I'm talking about. He's been talking a lot about STEM, and that's part of wanting to make sure that we're not spending precious government funds training people in areas that will be irrelevant in the future or that are dying out now.
Right, and looking at the student loan incentive there in other developed countries, we did see in the Biden administration he did write off some student loans. Is there a way we can incentivize hiring at this point? Maybe propose some kind of student loan tax credit for private companies that want to take over loan repayments for some Nelfund beneficiaries that they hire. That's something that could be looked into.
You know what? You should go into consultancy. That's a great idea, Mr. Williams. Look, I'll tell you something, right? This country is full of thinkers, right? We need to find as many ideas as possible to make this work. What the president has done is that he's given us a template. Go and run with it. Let's find as many ideas as possible to make this work. I love what you just said, and I'm not going to pretend that, that we're doing this. We're looking for ideas. How can we ensure that there's maximum participation in, from the polity, if you like, to ensure that we find ways of incentivizing? I can tell you that we have Nelfund beneficiaries, people who have graduated now, who are looking for work, okay? And we want to encourage corporate organizations. I mentioned earlier that many organizations come and get contracts from government, right? So, we need to create that ecosystem where, those who are getting government patronage, government work, are also recognizing that government is making efforts to train people to come and work for them and work for them properly. We need to get some of these organizations to deliberately put a proportion of the jobs that they have in the direction of the loan beneficiaries. We need to do that with government, but more importantly, with private sector organizations. Private sector organizations who are benefiting from Nigeria should be giving jobs, offering job opportunities to those who have taken loans, okay? Because we're all part of the same ecosystem. They benefit, the system benefits, the students who have taken loans benefit. But, like I said, let's talk about it. Let's have these conversations.
Right.
Because, we're lots of thinkers here. We need to get the thinking going so that as we move forward, we make this thing work properly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I do hope, you get all the funding that you need. I hope the students, get the jobs that they need also to pay back, some of those loans. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Akintunde Sawyerr is the MD CEO, Nigeria Education Loan Fund. That's Nelfund. And Happy New Year again. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for your great questions, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.